Today, friends, we will focus on invocation, seeing that the meditation contains 3 invocations. So let's talk about invocations. What does the sounding of the Om and their effect, as well as sounding the invocations, what are their effects? And is there a way of saying it? Let's explore this. And also we will also explore how invocations are intended to evoke extraplanetary forces. So the invocations and the sounding of the Om. DK tells us that words of power, ancient mantras such as the Lord Prayer and the Great Invocation are only effective if used upon the mental plane and with the power of a controlled mind, focused on their intent and their meaning behind the spoken effort. They then become potent. But when they said with the power of the soul as well as the directed attention of the mind, they automatically become dynamically effective. PK here is talking about the effect of the Om. He tells us that the Om is potent and dynamically effective when rightly used, and will produce changes, destroy that which must be eliminated or ended, and will build in, by attraction and consolidation, that which is desired into the fabric of the group life. So these are the effects of the Om on the group life, but it produces incidentally, though nonetheless, certainly, needed changes in the wise reconstruction of the individual life. So the sounding of the Om has got an effect both in group life as well as in the individual life of the disciple, sounding it. Now, why eliminative? We were told in the meditation that it was a destruction brought about by the greatly strengthened life within the form. That is, it's the distribution of the life energy of Buddhi, of the jewel within the egoic lotus of our soul. And one of the effects of the Om on the 3 bodies is eliminative on all 3 levels: mental, astral, and etheric. DK tells us that one of the effects drives out coarse particles and brings in finer material. So it's eliminative. So it's the Buddhi within the soul, within the chakra, when the jewel in each chakra is stimulated. And why is that so? Why is it so eliminative? Because the soul is jewel and is Atma Buddhi. That is, it is the first and the second aspect that it's made of. So it's that first aspect which eliminates, which is greatly strengthened, and that's one of the effects. Now, we've just seen the powerful changes that is initiated in the disciple's life, as well as in the group life, by the use of the Om. But here DK tells us, what I'm here telling you refers not only to the use of, and here I'm just going to change his words a little bit, not only to the use of the sacred word, but also to the use of the great invocation. So both the Om and the great invocation change lives, reorient their life purpose and focus, and achieve spiritual unfoldment and expansion if they could use the Om and the great invocation as it should be used. Let's enumerate other effects of the Om as well. So what results, therefore, when the Om is correctly sounded by a group of people rightly intermingled? One, a very strong current is set up, and it puts the group en rapport with the brotherhood, with hierarchy, with the ashram. It creates a vacuum between the group and those on the inner side. And all these three groups, the lower, which is the personalities, the higher, the egoic souls within the group, and the brotherhood, hierarchy, are linked in a triangle for the transmission of force. The life force of the Logos, Buddhi, love of hierarchy. And the Om has also a definite effect on the physical vehicles of the lower group, which means the group on earth. It intensifies the vibration of the emotional bodies. It stimulates the lower mind, yet at the same time opens the connection with the higher mind. And when the higher mind enters in, it stabilizes the lower concrete mind. It also attracts the attention of certain divas. It creates a protective shell around the group, and it aids in the work of evolution, infinitesimal that aid may be, yet every effort that stimulates vibration and facilitates the contact between the higher and the lower is an instrument in the hand of the Logos for the hastening of his plan. Now, these are quite an enumeration for the effects of the Om. Now, DK tells us, if the above is true of the Om and of its group effects, it is infinitely more true of the great invocation. And mind you, when DK wrote that, that was in 1939. So here he's referring to the first invocation, which he gave out in 1935. But his statement applies also to the three invocations that he gave. The second one given out during the Second World War in 1940, and the third invocation, the final one or the new one, in 1945. Now we are told that words of power, and as well as the Om, are all of a second ray origin. This is the ray of the manifestation of consciousness. They are therefore intended for soul use, because the soul is the expression of the second aspect of divinity, and only the soul can really employ these words and sounds, and thus produce the desired results, which are always in line with a divine plan. It is frequently forgotten, DK tells us, that they must be used by the soul in a dynamic manner, involving the serious recognition of the will aspect. The great invocation, the Om, and all such words of power must go forth from the soul, whose nature is love and whose purpose is solely group good, backed by the dynamic will aspect and carried outward as an integrated thought form upon a stream of living, illumined mental substance. Now, this process, therefore, brings into activity the will, the love, and the intelligence of the man who is using these words and formulas. So it behooves us, therefore, to learn how to use, how to say these great invocations and the Om as well, because we can see the great effects that they have on our mechanism, on our subtle bodies. DK tells us that there are several mantric formulas and words of power in use by students, but they fail to accomplish very much because the person using them has no real understanding of their import and purpose, and is usually so focused in his astral nature that all that he says and does in connection with such words of power is entirely futile. So now let's read this stupendous statement from DK. The great invocation, rightly used, could reorient the consciousness of humanity, stabilize men in spiritual being, disrupt and rebuild the planetary thought form which men have created in the past, and which has had and is having such disastrous and cataclysmic results, and open the door into the new age, thus ushering in the new and the better civilization. This could be done so rapidly that the needed changes would come about almost overnight. Now, what an arresting thought. This could be done so rapidly that the needed changes would come almost overnight. The present reign of horror will end, and the race of men could settle down to a life of group goodwill, individual harmlessness, and right human relations. So that's very encouraging, isn't it? And DK gives us a few clues here. How many use the great invocation in a purely detached, spiritually potent, and fully understanding manner? The merest handful, he says. How many sent forth the great invocation in a spirit of pure love and a completely unbiased attitude? Very few indeed. How many sounded it through the medium of a controlled mind, with a recognition and deep belief that it embodied the will of the planetary logos and must therefore become dynamically effective upon the physical plane? hardly more than a tiny handful. So that was said to his students or his disciples way back then in 1939, when in 1936 he gave, 35 rather, he gave the first great invocation. But let's be clever about it. And let's see through these words what clues as to how to use the great invocation. So let's summarize it. So the great invocation to be used in detached and spiritually potent and fully understanding manner, in a spirit of pure love and a completely unbiased attitude. And we sound it through the medium of a controlled mind with a recognition and deep belief that it embodies the will of the planetary logos. In other words, then we become the mouthpiece, the manifestation of the will of the logos when we say the great invocations with meaning, with significance, understanding what they are referring to. However, there is a dual activity that needs to be retained while saying it. One, it's the becoming aware of the intent, the meaning, and the purpose of the formula being used. And at the same time, sending forth the potency which is hidden, and yet it's conveyed by the words or the sound. So these two activities must be carried on simultaneously by the soul on its own plane through the medium of the mind and the brain. So those who use it must be instructed to say the words aloud, thus making a volume of sound of real potency. And they must say it with all the power of their wills behind them. It is the invocation of the will to good that is the objective of the forces who can aid at this time. And this realization by us is of paramount importance, friends. So what we are really invoking from these forces of light, from these stupendous beings, is the will to good, buddhi, to be distributed on earth. And only those who can use the formula effectively, who live, work, think, and feel as souls, which means ever in group terms, because the soul is group conscious. So when we say it, we must say the great invocations or sounding the Om as if we were the soul or the group soul. And how to say it? Dike tells us, say the words with all the power of your soul behind them, with intensity of feeling. Then they will be potent in their invocative appeal. If it is said also with mental intensity and ardent purpose. And in reference to words of power, in other words, great invocation as well, It is the thought behind the form, the registered feeling about the words, and the understanding of their significance, which is of importance. And if uttered with an understanding of their meaning, they are of terrific potency. So let's summarize then all the points that DK mentioned regarding how to say the great invocation. 1, with intensity of feeling. 2, with mental intensity as well, and with ardent purpose, because we know why we are saying it. With full understanding of the intent, meaning, and purpose of the words, while sending forth the potency hidden within the words. Putting all the power of our will behind it, saying it as a soul, using the mind and the brain as agents, saying it aloud, and saying it as a group, saying it, very importantly, saying it in cooperation with hierarchy, recognizing that the soul is one. So we are one with hierarchy. And saying the great invocation, sounding the Om after each stanza. And this refers to the new invocation, that is the one in the 1945, from 1945. And raising the clasped hands above the head, and then bringing them down to the forehead and to the heart, because this is symbolic of lifting of heart and life and consciousness to divinity, and the subsequent downflow of the spiritual life into the personality. Note that the emphasis is laid upon the heart center and upon the necessity to hold the forces there, symbolized by the clasped hands resting upon the heart, because the heart is the center of love, giving energy, and the distributor of life. So what's DK looking for? I am seeking, he says, all over the world for a group of aspirants and disciples who can and will use the great invocation in the right way, and who will be willing, consequently, to be trained to do so. And in this way, there will be a group upon the physical plane and in everyday life who will be able to combine their efforts with those of hierarchy, and thus produce an effective use of the great invocation with its stupendous results. The art of invocation has been, however, relatively unknown, especially in the West. It employs the dynamic will and the focused mind, and is intended to evoke response from the forces which will condition the new world. So a focused will or intention, a convinced mind, a dedicated desire, and a planned activity are essential to success. The sincerity of your purpose and the love of your hearts can and will help make possible the great approach, and so hasten the great release. I would have you, from the time you receive this communication, think deeply on what I have said, to walk silently in the light of your souls, to radiate love, to seek clarity of vision, and then, when needed, to speak to others with power and understanding. When the great invocation is thus rightly used, friends, and the world centers are consequently consciously interrelated, then certain extraplanetary energies can be called in by the ruler of Shambhala, by Sanat Kumara himself, to aid in the readjustment required for the new age and its coming civilization. Today, there are those in every land who respond to world affairs and conditions increasingly as souls, and who can therefore be trained to work upon the physical plane. And when this is so, it becomes possible to impart some of those words of power and mentrum, and to institute that new and potent activity which will bring humanity and hierarchy into conscious and direct cooperation. Now, not only humanity and hierarchy, read the next sentence, as well as Shambhala and certain great forces which are interplanetary or solar, and also great cosmic energies. So this is very encouraging. And obviously, Sanat Kumara has decided that it should be so, because we have had 3 Shambhala impacts up to now. So which means that Christ can invoke together with us and hierarchy, invoke these stupendous beings. And when we invoke them, they are compelled to respond. So it's the invocation which will evoke contact with the spiritual lives and the divine embodied energies, as well as with hierarchy, which is their intermediary, in order to bring about the manifestation on earth of the soul of humanity. And this is very encouraging, because this is now for the first time possible in the life of the planet. And that was written back in 1939. So it's very, very encouraging, because now this is even more so. So what are these forces that DK was talking about? Now we know the avatar synthesis, and we know about the spirit of peace. But he says these forces, spiritual and potent in nature, exist in 2 categories: solar forces, which are interplanetary, and cosmic forces, which enter our solar system via Jupiter as the transmitter of divine energies from Virgo and from Aquarius, which Jupiter esoterically governs, because Jupiter is the also the hierarchical ruler of Virgo. Jupiter is also exoterically, and from the angle of Orthodox astrology, it rules Sagittarius, the sign of discipleship, and also Pisces. It rules Pisces, the sign of the world saviors. So this is so encouraging. So there is a lot of hope here. So why Virgo? Because Virgo is esoterically the mother of the Christ child, and is therefore the emanator of energies which nourish and aid the growth of the Christ consciousness within the form. And why Aquarius? Because Aquarius is the coming expression of the group consciousness, which is the first and immediate revelation of the ever-present Christ consciousness on a large scale in humanity. So all these forces are being evoked, and they have responded to the call of not only Sanat Kumara, but also us, together with hierarchy and the Christ. The forces which are contacted by the use of this great invocation in conjunction with trained hierarchical effort are thereby attracted and magnetically impelled to respond. And that's because they follow the law, the spiritual law, that they can only respond if called for. But once they are called for, then they must respond. This is a spiritual law. Ask and you will receive, said Christ 2000 years ago. And that's very much what this is all about. Invocation is all about asking the help of these extraplanetary and cosmic forces and asking them to respond. The energy then of the will to good serves to awaken the illumined but latent will to good in men. And this, once dynamically awakened, will flower forth as goodwill. As I just said to you earlier on, humanity has already experienced 3 Shambhala impacts in the last 100 years. So Sanat Kumara is sending all his energy down so that the new world order will occur and take place, and that men will cooperate in goodwill and live with harmlessness. But all this takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So what's the effect then of the will to good on the physical plane? The direct inflow of the will to good to humanity produces upon the physical plane a hastening of the divine plan and a more rapid working out of that which is to be. But for us mere mortals, it's not coming soon enough, is it? But unfortunately, all these things take time. Nothing, DK tells us, nothing can arrest the eventual progress of this will to good and its planned activity any more than a bud which has started to unfold its petals in the light of the sun, and subject to the proper stimulation can revert again to the condition of a tightly closed bud. Potential, but unexpressed. Thank you, friends, for joining us today. It's been such a joy to be with you today and to meditate. And I can feel every week the energies are becoming more and more potent, more. I can feel the group intensifying its energy. And thank you for being with us.